Her husband sold her for a sack of corn because she was barren. That was the bitter truth that tore her world apart. In the small village where she lived, people whispered behind her back, saying she was cursed, unlucky, and useless to her husband because she could not bear him a child. She tried everything, prayed every night, went to the village healer, and even drank bitter herbs that made her sick, but no child ever came. At first her husband, Barren, was patient, but as the years went by, his patience turned into anger. He grew cold and distant, no longer speaking to her kindly, no longer smiling when she cooked his favorite food or washed his clothes. One day, without even asking her, he made a decision that would change her life forever. He sold her, like an object, to a rancher in exchange for a sack of corn. When he told her, she could not believe her ears. She fell to her knees and begged him not to do this, but he turned away, saying he had no use for a barren wife. The day of the exchange was humiliating beyond words. She stood in the courtyard, trembling, as her husband dragged her forward. In front of everyone, the deal was made. The villagers gathered to watch, some shaking their heads in pity, others gossiping excitedly as if it were entertainment. A sack of golden corn lay on the ground, and beside it stood the rancher, a tall and silent man named Barren. His face was unreadable, his eyes sharp but strangely calm. He did not speak a single word during the transaction. Barren pushed her forward roughly, and she stumbled, almost falling, before Barren caught her by the arm. Without a word, he lifted the sack of corn onto his shoulder and walked away with her following behind like a shadow. Tears blurred her eyes, and her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She thought her life was over, that she had been discarded like trash. The rancher's land was far from the village, a lonely place surrounded by endless fields and grazing animals. The silence there was heavy, broken only by the sounds of the wind and the calls of birds. At first, she was terrified. She had no idea what Barren wanted from her, whether he would treat her cruelly or whether he had bought her as nothing more than a servant. But as days passed, she began to notice something strange about him. He did not order her around, he did not raise his hand to her, and he did not speak harsh words. In fact, he hardly spoke at all. He worked from dawn till night, tending his cattle, fixing fences, and plowing the land, while she cooked and cleaned quietly in the house. At night, when he came inside, she would serve him food. He would nod slightly in thanks but say nothing more. This silence confused her at first, but slowly it began to comfort her. After years of her husband's cruelty, his insults and constant reminders of her barrenness, the rancher's quiet presence felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, she was not being blamed for something she could not control. She was not being treated like a burden. She began to notice the small ways he showed kindness. When she cut her hand while chopping vegetables, he brought her clean cloth to bandage it, his rough fingers surprisingly gentle. When the nights grew cold, he left extra firewood by the door without a word. When she coughed for days, he rode miles to bring her herbs from the healer, though he never explained where he had gone. His silence was not empty, it was filled with unspoken care. Slowly, the wounds inside her heart began to heal. She found herself humming while she worked, something she had not done for years. She found herself smiling when the cattle nudged her hands playfully. She began to look forward to the evenings when the rancher returned, when she would place food before him and catch the faintest glimmer of gratitude in his eyes. One evening, when the sun was setting and painting the sky with colors of fire, she finally gathered the courage to speak to him. "Why did you take me?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "Why did you give corn for a barren woman?" He looked at her for a long moment, and though his lips remained silent, his eyes spoke volumes. He did not see her as barren. He did not see her as useless. He saw her as a human being, deserving of dignity, respect, and care. His silence itself was the answer. He had not bought her to own her, he had taken her to save her. From that day, something shifted between them. She began to speak more freely in his presence, telling him stories of her childhood, of how she used to run barefoot through the fields, of how she once dreamed of being a mother. Though he never said much, he listened with patience. His quiet listening was more comforting than 1,000 empty words. She realized that she no longer felt the ache of being childless as painfully as before. For the first time, she felt she was enough, just as she was. As months turned into years, she and the rancher built a quiet life together. They planted crops side by side, shared simple meals, and faced the seasons together. The people in the nearby villages began to talk again, but this time the whispers carried admiration instead of pity. They said the barren woman had found a better life than anyone had expected. They said the silent rancher had given her back not just her dignity but her very life. Her former husband, meanwhile, wasted away in bitterness. The sack of corn he had exchanged for her was long gone, and he realized too late that he had thrown away someone who might have stood by his side forever. He came once to the ranch, demanding she return to him, but she stood tall for the first time in her life. With the rancher's calm presence beside her, she told Radin she was no longer his wife, no longer his possession. Radin left in shame, his eyes full of regret. She never looked back. She had found a place where silence spoke louder than cruelty, where care was shown through actions instead of harsh words. She had found a man who gave her life without demanding anything in return. And though she never bore a child, she realized that motherhood was not the only way to give life. She gave life through her kindness, through the meals she cooked, through the warmth she spread in the lonely ranch house. Together, she and the silent rancher created a home filled with peace, and that home was enough. In the end, her story was no longer about being barren or being sold for corn. It was about rebirth, about finding worth where others saw none, and about the quiet power of love that does not need words to be felt. She had once been discarded like nothing, but now she lived like everything. She had once been broken, but now she was whole. The silent rancher had not only given her a place to stay, he had given her life.